Welcome to the Renaissance Spirit.
The year was 161 AD. Oh, how the gods must have been laughing when they sent me into this world, because little did they know the glorious emperor I would become, or so I imagined. Hail Commodus, son of Marcus Aurelius, born into the lap of luxury and thrown onto the very throne of Rome. A throne meant for men of wisdom, strength and virtue. But alas, it found me instead. Now, before you start throwing your gladius at the screen, just know this. I didn't ask for this. Yes, that's right. I, Commodus, the great and terrible, didn't exactly crave the empire from my cradle. Imagine growing up in the shadow of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, a man who was always spouting something about stoicism, while I was trying to learn how to use a sword. Fun times, right? Father would lecture me about duty, virtue, and governing an empire, while all I really wanted to do was fight in the Colosseum. But more on that later. Oh, and my dear sister Lucilla. Let's not forget her. She had her own ideas about ruling, mostly involving plots that didn't end well for either of us. Family, am I right? Always conspiring or judging. But what did they expect? With a father obsessed with philosophy and a sister eyeing the throne like a wolf eyes a lamb, I had to survive the only way I knew how, by becoming the best at being the worst. So, let's lay it all out here, friends. In this little confession of mine, you'll see how a boy born into privilege and expectations decided to break all the rules. I'll talk about my rise to the imperial throne, my reign that, surprise, didn't go as badly as everyone says, and my untimely death at the hands of betrayal. You saw that one coming, didn't you? We'll talk legacy, what really matters, and then I'll give you a little wisdom, Commodus style, on equality, liberty, and the other nice ideals I had no time for back in my day. But oh, how I've learned. Let's start at the beginning though. The golden child of Rome. Born in Lanuvium near Rome. Lavish upbringing. Tutors, philosophers, military training. Sounds great, right? Wrong. You try growing up being told you're destined to rule the world, only to realise that everyone's just waiting for you to fail spectacularly. It's like walking into an arena, thinking you're the champion, only to find the lions are hungrier than you expected. But enough about that. In part 2, I'll tell you how I made my first real move toward the throne, despite my father's best efforts to make me a stoic of all things. Spoiler. I wasn't interested in long, drawn-out philosophies. I wanted action, adventure, blood. But first, I had to take the crown. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where Commodus becomes emperor, whether Rome wanted it or not. Ah, 180 AD, a year that will forever be remembered as the moment Rome got exactly what it didn't ask for. Me, Emperor Commodus. Now let's get one thing straight. I wasn't exactly thrilled to become emperor. Who needs all that responsibility when there's glory to be had in the Colosseum? But life has a way of dragging you into things, doesn't it? You see, my father, Marcus Aurelius, that paragon of virtue, spent his whole life trying to prepare me for greatness. Military campaigns, statecraft lessons, endless talks about philosophy, duty, and self-sacrifice. It was all so tedious. I mean, really, what good is pondering the meaning of life when you could be out there shaping it with your own hands? But my father, ever the stoic, thought I could be moulded, transformed into a wise ruler like him. Joke's on him. Now, I know what you're thinking. Commodus, what about your military career? Didn't you show some promise? Sure, I dabbled in it. I even accompanied father on a few campaigns, but let's face it, my heart wasn't in it. While he was strategizing in the icy forests of Germania, I was dreaming of the sand-covered floor of the Colosseum. And then, one fateful day, it happened. Father, the mighty philosopher emperor, fell ill. And just like that, the weight of the Roman Empire was dropped squarely onto my shoulders. His last words to me? Something about duty, sacrifice, and wisdom. I'll admit, there was a brief moment where I thought, maybe I can do this. But that passed quicker than a chariot on race day. My father might have been a man of the people, But I knew the people didn't need more lectures on virtue. They needed entertainment, excitement, me. So there I was, at 18, the youngest emperor Rome had seen in a while, staring at the throne with a mixture of excitement and dread. My father's reign had been marked by war, philosophy, and endless discussions about the greater good. Mine? Oh, it was going to be different. Of course, the Senate wasn't exactly thrilled by my ascension. "He's too young," they said. "He's unfit for leadership," they cried. Typical. As if they knew anything about real power. But that's the thing about power. You don't need approval to wield it. I had the legions, I had the throne, and soon enough I'd show them all just how wrong they were. In the next part, we'll dive into my reign. I'll tell you how I changed everything and how I was judged for it. You'll see how Commodus, the Maud emperor, was simply ahead of his time. I didn't follow in the footsteps of Marcus Aurelius, because, frankly, those footsteps were boring. Instead, I carved my own path, one filled with grandeur, spectacle, and a little chaos. But what's an empire without a little fun? Don't go anywhere, because things are about to get interesting. Ah, my reign. This is where the story really takes off. You've heard it all, I'm sure. The stories of excess, madness, and how I supposedly undid all the good my father, Marcus Aurelius, had accomplished. But let's get one thing straight. Marcus was a philosopher, not a showman. He gave the people wisdom. I gave them what they truly wanted: spectacle, entertainment. So, yes, while father's reign was marked by wars and his stoic musings on human nature, mine was something else entirely. I was the antidote to the drudgery of Marcus's rule. You see, my father was all about restraint, duty, and this nebulous thing called the greater good. He fought wars on distant frontiers, writing long, self-reflective books that only the most boring senators would care to read. And sure, the Roman Empire expanded, the borders were secure, and everyone applauded his wisdom. But let's be honest, was anyone really enjoying it? Was life in the empire fun? Enter Commodus. I wasn't interested in securing more provinces for an empire that was already vast beyond reason. What I wanted was to bring the heart of Rome back to the people. And what is Rome, if not the Colosseum, the gladiatorial games, and the thrill of blood sport? I'm sure you've read how I participated in the games myself. Critics called it undignified, but I saw it differently. I wasn't just the emperor, I was the people's champion. I gave them a spectacle, the likes of which no emperor before me had dared. After all, who needs more tedious treaties with barbarian tribes when you can fight a lion with your bare hands? Yes, I heard the whispers. "He's mad," they said. "He thinks he's Hercules reincarnated," they scoffed. And you know what? Maybe I was. Because I didn't just rule from the marble halls of the palace. I lived Rome's greatest mythos. I was Hercules. I fought. I conquered. I entertained. The Senate, those old dusty hypocrites, didn't understand this. To them, I was an aberration, a boy playing at power. But I had my own kind of power. The kind that comes not from Stoic philosophy, but from the raw, visceral excitement that the people craved. I wasn't concerned with being remembered as a philosopher king like my father. No, my reign was about now. I didn't want to secure Rome's future. I wanted to make the present unforgettable. Sure, I may have renamed Rome after myself, but why not? If you're going to be the emperor, be the emperor. Marcus Aurelius gave the people a thoughtful empire. I gave them a thrilling one. Of course, we all know how it ended, but that's for the next chapter. We'll talk about betrayal, death, and how even gods like me can fall. Because in the end, the people loved me. But power? Power is fickle. In part 4, we'll discuss my death, betrayal, assassination, and the ultimate fall of an emperor who, for all his supposed madness, gave Rome a reign to remember. Stay tuned, because the story only gets darker from here. Ah, 192 AD, the year my reign came crashing down. They say all good things must come to an end, but I can assure you there was nothing good about the way I went out. You'd think a man who had faced lions and gladiators in the Colosseum could handle a few scheming senators. But betrayal, my friends, doesn't wear armour. It slithers in the shadows, whispers in your ear, and stabs you when you least expect it. Let's be honest, I had it coming. I wasn't exactly making friends with the Senate, or anyone who considered themselves a serious Roman leader. My renaming of the months after myself? Not popular. Declaring myself a living god, the reincarnation of Hercules? Apparently, people don't like their rulers to be that bold. Who knew? But come on, what's the point of being emperor if you can't have a little fun? Rule the world and still be chained to some outdated idea of humility? Not my style. But let's get to the good part, my death. It wasn't on the battlefield or in the Colosseum, where I should have gone out in a blaze of glory. No, instead, I met my end at the hands of a wrestler. A wrestler, not even a gladiator worthy of the arena. It all started with a little conspiracy, naturally. My trusted advisor, Marcia, and a few other high-ranking conspirators decided that my time on the throne had gone on long enough. Apparently, my plans to take part in the New Year's Day games as a gladiator again was just too much for them to stomach. They tried poison first. How pedestrian. They slipped it into my food, but of course I was too strong for that. After all, I am, or was, Hercules reincarnated, remember? When the poison didn't do the job, they sent in their backup plan, a wrestler named Narcissus. Not exactly the dramatic end I would have written for myself. But there you have it. 1 minute, I'm planning my next glorious victory in the arena, and the next, I'm being strangled to death in my bath by someone whose claim to fame was pinning people to the floor. Not exactly the heroic death I imagined. But hey, when you've made enemies of the Senate, your own advisors, and pretty much anyone who cares about politics, betrayal comes with the territory. In my last moments, I realized that power, for all its grandeur, is fragile, even for someone like me. But here's the thing, even as I died, I knew my story wasn't over. What they didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, was that I wasn't just another emperor. I had given Rome something different, something unforgettable. Sure, they wiped my name from history for a while, but look at us now, discussing my reign centuries later. Seems like I had the last laugh after all. In part 5, we'll explore what came after my legacy, tarnished though it may be, and how history remembers me. Spoiler alert, it's not as bad as they made it out to be. Stick around because the Commodus story isn't over yet. Legacy. It's funny, really. You think you'll be remembered for your triumphs, your innovations, maybe even your dazzling Colosseum performances. But when the dust settles, it turns out you're remembered for all the wrong reasons, or at least that's what they want you to believe. After my untimely demise in 192 AD, the Senate wasted no time in throwing a party to celebrate. They couldn't wait to wipe my name from the history books. They issued a damnatio memoriae, basically erasing me from existence, or so they thought. They wanted the world to forget Commodus, the mad emperor, the man who dared to call himself a god and preferred the sword to the scroll. They thought they'd succeeded too for a while. But let's be honest, people don't forget, especially when you've lived as outrageously as I did. Sure, the Senate tried to undo everything I'd built. They tore down my statues, reversed my decrees, and painted me as a lunatic who plunged Rome into chaos. I became the poster child for imperial decadence, the ultimate example of what happens when you let someone too young, too brash, and too entertaining take the throne. But here's the catch. They couldn't erase my impact. You see, while they were busy restoring order to the empire, the people, the ones who really mattered, remembered me differently. Sure, I was no Marcus Aurelius, but I didn't want to be. Marcus was the emperor of philosophers, of statesmen fine. I was the emperor of the people. I gave Rome something to cheer for. I brought the Colosseum back to its full glory. I gave the empire a bit of colour in a sea of dull, grey stoicism. Was my reign turbulent? Absolutely. Was I brash? Guilty as charged. But madness? No. What I did was break the mould. While my father gave Rome peace and order, I gave it life, maybe a chaotic, unpredictable life. But life nonetheless. And you know what? History needs characters like me. Without the Commoduses of the world, things get boring. And boredom is the death of any great civilization. Over time, they've tried to redefine me as nothing more than a cautionary tale, the emperor who lost his mind. But here we are, in the modern world, still talking about me. My face on ancient coins is still sought after by collectors. Statues of me, the ones that survived, are admired in museums. If you visit the Colosseum, you can almost feel the energy of my reign, the games, the spectacle. That's not the legacy of a failure. It's the legacy of someone who refused to be forgotten. In the final part, we'll ask the big question: was it all worth it? Could Commodus, the so-called mad emperor, teach the modern world a thing or two about freedom, equality, and democracy? Stay tuned. Spoiler: I've learned a lot since I've been gone. So, was it all worth it? You're probably thinking Commodus, the so-called mad emperor, must have regrets. But the truth is, I lived exactly as I wanted. However, with the benefit of hindsight, and perhaps the perspective that only centuries can bring, I've come to realise a few things that I didn't quite understand in my younger, more impulsive days. Back then, I saw power as something to wield, not something to share. I ruled for me, not for Rome, and certainly not for any grand ideals of equality or liberty. Those were the fantasies of philosophers like my father, abstract concepts that had little place in the gritty reality of gladiatorial combat or imperial politics. Yet, with all this time to reflect, I see how wrong I was. You see, equality and liberty aren't just fluffy ideas for debates. They're the lifeblood of any lasting civilization. If there's one thing I learned after my fall, it's this: an empire without fairness, without some sense of shared power, crumbles under the weight of its own excess. Oh, trust me, I enjoyed the excess, but at what cost? Ruling by fear, spectacle, and whim doesn't create a sustainable legacy. It builds resentment, and resentment is a silent enemy, always lurking until the right moment to strike. Just ask Narcissus, the wrestler who choked the life out of me. Had I focused more on listening to the Senate, to the people, to anyone outside of my own reflection in a bronze mirror, things might have turned out differently. Maybe my reign would have had the kind of stability my father's had, without losing that essential spark of joy and life that I brought to Rome. Looking at the world today, I can see why equality, liberty, and democracy matter. They give power back to the people. They allow for voices to be heard rather than stifled. They provide a kind of balance that my reign sorely lacked. So, if I could do it all over again, would I still fight in the Colosseum? Absolutely. But maybe, just maybe, I'd fight a little harder for the people of Rome too. But let's not dwell too much on what-ifs. After all, my story is part of the grand mosaic of history. And if you think about it, that's why you're here, right? Exploring the past to understand the present, to see how the actions of an emperor, flawed though he may have been, shaped the world we live in today. My reign may not have been filled with philosophical musings or peaceful diplomacy, but it was real, it was human, and it showed Rome something it had never seen before. So, here's where we wrap things up. If you've ever wanted to walk in my footsteps, you should visit Rome's stand in the Colosseum where I fought. Imagine the roar of the crowd as they watched their emperor take on wild beasts and gladiators. Collect an ancient coin with my likeness on it. Hold history in your hand. Experience firsthand what remains of the empire I ruled, and see for yourself how history's judgment isn't always black and white. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Our channel, The Renaissance Spirit, is dedicated to pursuing a just, equitable, and humanitarian world, just as we've explored today. We dive into history, politics, culture, and personal growth to offer perspectives that are as timeless as they are vital in today's world. The Renaissance gave birth to the Enlightenment, but the pursuit of knowledge didn't end there. By learning from the past, yes, even from the reign of Commodus, we can better understand the world we live in and how to shape a future filled with compassion and wisdom. So, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share this with fellow seekers of knowledge. Explore the other videos on our channel, from ancient Rome to modern politics. And hey, take the quiz to see if you've got the Renaissance spirit within you. Vive Renaissance Spiritus! History, my friends, hasn't died. It's just waiting for you to understand it. Now, go forth and discover your own legacy,